So I'd like to go ahead and get started and introduce Azael Fernandez. He's currently responsible or part of the Mexican IPv6 Forum, and is also on the IPv6 Project Working Group at the National Autonomous University of Mexico. He serves as the coordinator of the IPv6 Working Group in, is it CUDI? CUDI? Corporación Universitaria what is it?
National Academic.
National Academic, okay. Mexican Internet 2 Consortium. And Claire, the Latin American Cooperation of Advanced Networks. He's in charge of the Network Emerging Technologies Laboratory in the Networking Department, testing IPv6, IPsec, QoS, MPLS, VoIP, PLC, WDM, and supports other technologies and equipments from different companies and on many different platforms. He also participates in all of our regular North American IPv6 Forum conference calls and has been involved for years and years. So thank you, sir. Thank you very much for coming.
Okay, thank you, Ed, for introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here in the North American IPv6 Task Force Summit. And let's start it. Well, as you know, Mexico is half in North America and half in Central America, so we are like in the middle of the two worlds. And we have been testing and research IPv6 and other technologies to be not only like buyers of the technology, but also to deploy and to be part of the research community to make it a better internet. Okay, so the agenda is I'm going to talk about in three main parts of the impacts that I am seeing. Well, not only in relation to IPv6, but in general in internet. So what I'm going to talk about IPv6 can also be applied with IPv4 deployment until it is complete in depletion. And so I'm going to talk about the environmental point of view, the social point of view, and what you have seen and listened during the day and tomorrow from an operational point of view, related mainly in cost. And I'm going to mention some recent news and documents that are taking place and during this year mainly. So with the numbers, as you can see, well, you already know the number of IPv6 addresses is finite with like any other internet resource. And I just make some research. For example, if you compare the number of the population in the world and the numbers here in the US, in this state of Colorado, in Denver, you can make your own calculation how many addresses per Denver inhabitants could receive today. We can count the number of tourists here and the number of participants in this event. You can also make some numbers and regarding all the technologies that are making possible to have bring your own device, and with Internet of Things that are just beginning, you can imagine the importance of IPv6. So some facts. I was just looking at the webpage today that in this region, it was supposed, well, it's projected that in March, it was 1 month. 1 month before, it was projected in February. It's going to take place finally the exhaustion for the IPv4 addresses. And Africa is the region that maybe they are going to have more addresses for many years. And according to the policies worldwide, it's not possible to buy in some regions, like in Latin America, the addresses that are being left in order to use it in that region. So it's important to not to focus on a specific date, but that something that is going to happen. So in the supply of IPv4 or IPv6 addresses, it's important to emphasize not only in the technical groups, but in the social, in the networking, and all the application groups, that the internet is changing. We have to be prepared for the change, in this case, of the version of the protocol, because the source of IPv4 addresses is going to deplete in some regions more quickly than in others. And for example, in this case, IPv6 is going to be for many years. We don't know. Some estimation says that maybe in 80 years we are going to have some problems with the number of addresses. Or who knows? No? It could happen sooner than later. Okay. So talking about the impacts of IPv6, but also could be IPv4 from an environmental point of view, for example, we can have a positive footprint of IPv6. For example, the reduction of the energy that uses the devices. Some experiments and some uses have demonstrated that the use of IPv6 could make the batteries of the devices to last longer, because there are not keep alive messages, but there are long life messages. So it has been a recent topic in the ITF in January, that, for example, with the use of neighbor discovery, we could have less energy use in the batteries. So there were some discussion, not a final resolution, that it could be a possible solution to respond to some router solicitation with unicast router advertisement sent by sender of other alternatives. So, but it is a fact that with the use of IPv6, we are going to have a greener internet and a greener use of the devices. Yeah? And talking about another positive footprint of IPv6, for example, because we have a fixed IPv6 header size, there is not fragmentation and in the middle devices, and it could have also a positive use of IPv6 with a more efficient sending of packets. And it could be also positive if we achieve the reduction of the use of extension headers. That is another discussion topic in the ITF mailing list. And as has been said before in the morning, sometimes IPv6 could be faster than IPv4. It depends in many factors, of course, in the degree of deployment of IPv6 in the whole path from the origin to the destiny. And so we need to, in the monitoring of our devices and all the environmental variables, and with the use of sensor network, it can have also IPv6. That's why a positive impact in the environment. Yeah. For example, some years ago in the Beijing International Internet Community or something like that, it was presented at this slide talking about IPv6 greening communities and how IPv6 and the ubiquitous green community control network could take place. So sooner than later, now that with the Internet of Things that is taking place more quickly today, and what we are going to see in the next future, we could have that goal, and to achieve that use of Internet, and with IPv6 could have a better influence and impact in the environment. Yeah. For example, there are some companies that are already deploying some building control devices and remote control of these elements, and the integration of different technologies such as RFID or Bluetooth or Zigbee, the Zigbee version with the IP support and others. So there's going to be a more integration and benefits of IPv6, for example, in some standard-based IPv6 network, in the smart grids field, and, for example, the street light monitoring and other devices. And some years ago, also, it was mentioned in some presentation in Japan that, according to their research, when you are deploying or starting to deploy IPv6, you can have some extra costs to deploy two versions, so you can call it two protocols at the same time. But some could be some years later or some months later, you can have, for example, 20% of saves in managing the networks once you have, for example, an IPv6 only network, and you start to stop using, for example, IP4, because you have those impacts in the software, hardware, and the humanware in the training to make it possible. No? So we are going to have that. And talking about the negative IPv6 footprint, for example, IPv6 can have a negative impact by producing there's a term that you can say consumerism, that relates to the fact that more money is needed by the people when you create a necessity not previous present by the use of some technologies or some devices. So in an indirect, maybe not completely direct way, IPv6 can have that negative impact with the use of many devices or the necessity of the people to be online every day, every second of their life. So according to a presentation last year, for example, in Google, it says that the Internet, taking in account all the infrastructure, Internet use about 10, maybe in these days 15 or maybe 20% of the energy consumption around the world. So if not green technologies are in parallel deployment of these technologies like IPv6, we can have a higher negative impact in the Internet, because there's a matter of fact that with more traffic, we are going to use more energy. Unless we use more, it's not easy to change to renewable energy sources from one day to another. It's like IPv6, it's not to be in many cases a migration, but a transition, a combination of both versions at the same time. Yeah. So we have, that was from the environmental point of view. That also relates to the social impacts of IPv6. As I mentioned, the negative impacts because of the necessities not present before, the more devices the people use, even in clothes, in what related or in conjunction or working with the Internet of Things consortium or something like that, we are going to have more devices that IPv6 enable, and maybe they are going to be IPv6 only devices in order to have less cost. And also that's why that according to my analysis, that is going to have a more sometimes positive but many times negative impacts in the social life. Yeah. So we can talk maybe in the next months or next years that IPv6 is already enabled in some smart devices such as smart glasses. For example, in some traffic signals, or for example in the traffic lights, there is the consortium, the intelligent transportation system that what I have seen, they are only working right now in IPv4, but maybe with the deploying more in devices and new devices, they are going to be IPv6 enabled. So it's going to be another important use of IPv6 or IP in general. So it has been mentioned as the IPv6 is necessary to a better deployment of all the things and devices that are going to be connected or related to internet, to the use of internet. There is also a project in Europe that this month ends. I don't know if they are going to continue that. For the last 3 years, they have been having a research project for the future of the things. So that's another project that's very interesting to follow. And there is also the Internet of Things Consortium that is working together with the IPv6 Forum. So in relation to the operational impacts of IPv6, the lack of IPv4 addresses that are continue using and all the different deployments that are using NATs and CGNs and all that kind of stuff that are complicating the connectivity and in some application in the management of some devices, and with the use of IPv6 that can give a better deployment to reduce the cost. And also the NAT, as I mentioned, when NAT devices have a negative use of the resource of for example, the battery. With the NAT, we can have also high impact in the economy of the companies on the enterprise. And if we start having more scenarios with IPv6, maybe we are going to have less latency and better throughput with IPv6 that is going to achieve maybe faster speeds, because there are not going to be tunnels. Maybe there are going to be more tunnels of IPv4 now over IPv6. Or maybe we are going to avoid that phase. So IPv6 is enable ecosystems. We can have that from the core internet, from the Pringle internet, Internet of Things. So in all those scenarios, IPv6 is going to have an impact, and it's going to be positive. We hope, not in a negative way. But we have to be concerned of the use of the internet, no? Because of all the security issues that have been make some changes from the original RFCs of IPv6 that are including more security. It was also mentioned in the morning, these standards interoperability model that we can find where is located IPv6 and the relation with the different consortium and forums like ZigBee and Internet of Things and many other organizations that are working together to integrate, because there is a matter of fact when we are maybe we produce new protocols and we are going to have like the initiative to have an Internet of the future, that we are not going to use the TCP IP stack. Maybe we are going to use another one. Well, who knows? And maybe with the integration of some, the interplanetary, for example, station, we are going to have more to break that frontier to enable more connectivity outside the Earth with IPv6. Maybe it's going not to be the like interplanetary internet with IPv4, only with IPv6. So it has been mentioned many years ago that, and you can test this in your own networks, that with the later you start using and testing IPv6, it's going to be higher the cost or more investment that you are going to need in areas, not only in software, but in particular humanware. So it's important, for example, in this summit, that the integration and the invitation to the universities and the academy to participate in to make more research, more deployments that are taking place. It's important for a better and positive operational impacts of IPv6. So with a good planning and all the costs that are taking place with the regular upgrades of your infrastructure in not only in hardware but in software, then maybe you have a roadmap that every 5 years, or in some cases it could be 10, or in particular, for example, in some Latin America countries. But now with all the deployment of SDN and all that virtualization technologies, maybe they are accelerating this opportunity to replace some devices, not waiting for the replacement from the hardware point of view, but with virtualization and with software, with the data centers, and with more data centers, in particular, for example, in my country, in Mexico, we are now having, for the first time, the first like NAP or IXP point. We are going to have maybe this at the end of this year, 2 more, because we are so close to the United States that for many years it was not from cost or maybe from the dominant ISPs, it was not seen like a necessity to have a point of to interchange traffic and to have national traffic, not having to travel here to the US. And for example, in some 10 years ago, for example, it was created. That's why the Latin American academic network that is called Clara Network, with the support of the European Union, to have some traffic travel to Europe directly without having to cross coming here to the US. So those kind of things, with the deployment of IPv6 and, as I mentioned, with all the related technologies, that there's a positive operational impact that IPv6 is going to have. No? And there has been some calculations, as I mentioned before, that when is going to be the deployment of IPv6, when in how many years from today. And according to you can have some projection, and that also was mentioned. There are some projections that mention how the deployment numbers that are taking place higher. For example, in some years, there's going to be maybe we're going to reach the 50% of the traffic around the world that is going to be IPv6 enabled. So I invite you to review the recent documents that have been published. Because as you know, the use of IPv6 and other technologies these are live documents, and it's important how IPv6 has been integrated with other technologies, and it's continued to have an evolution, a positive evolution. And some recent forecasts that I found, for example, 80% of the smartphone and tablets, they are going to be IPv6 enabled by 2018. And we are going to have more than 90% of the laptops and many machine-to-machine connection with IPv6 enabled. And I invite you also to follow the recent news and some social networks that are finally ready with IPv6 support, and some ISPs here in the US, the use of other technologies. Some networks around the world are deploying for the first day IPv6, not waiting to deploy IPv6 in the future. And it's important to follow what's going to happen with the availability of IPv4 addresses. We are going to have more deployments of IPv6 that are going to have a positive impact in the use of the internet. So we don't have still We cannot say IPv4 is dead already. No, have to survive and live together. And I reviewed this, the IPv4 versus the IPv6, for example. It was like a good comparison. And well, the sky is really falling with IPv6, or it's going to fall. And I invite you to review all the different news that are taking place, and how it has, for example, 2 years ago that with the launch of IPv6, how the news took in consideration that change in the internet, not taking or not going into details, the technical details, but because it was viewed like an important change in the internet. So we have already some IPv6 on the road. Maybe you have seen some cars around with the plates. You can choose the plate. Here in the USA, in Mexico, it's not possible. And I invite you to review some of our webpage with more information, with more regional information of the news, what we are, where we are using, what is happening with the ISPs in our countries, and so on. No? So that's all for me, and thank you very much. Yeah.
So do we have any questions? Anyone want to ask about how they do BGP pairing down in Mexico? There's some interesting stuff that goes on regionally. It's really sort of fascinating.
You mentioned in the slide the reduction in the use of extension headers. Can you elaborate on that? And I'll tell you where I'm coming from is, so from an IDS, IPS perspective, looking down into all the extension headers is a time-consuming process. So I was wondering what you meant by reduction of those.
Yes, for example, if you have followed some of the ITF discussion that they are mentioning, well, that the headers, the additional headers that you can have, you can reduce the use of them, and it can make less impact the use of IPv6. For example, if you take into account the SIG-low PAN and all that kind of examples to use IPv6, and in the devices that you are going to have with Internet of Things, that they have a reduction or a compact version of the stack. I was referring to that. And also from a security point of view, there are some discussion taking place that if we eliminate the need to send so many router advertisement or neighbor discovery, we are going to have a less or a smaller header. Yeah.
Other questions? You guys are ready to hear me sing now? Is that it? Well, Zale, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.